29 years old. My life in Charles County, representing Southern Maryland all the way. I'm proud to say that my parents really attended Sacred Heart Church for many years. Graduate of Archbishop Neal, went to McDonough, and graduated from St. Mary's College with honors. So for me to be here tonight, it's really almost like being welcomed home. So I really, even though I'm still in Southern Maryland, I'm just in the next county, but I'm still in Charles County every week. So thank you again for the invitation. It's a bit of a sad story in the beginning, but thanks to support and the amazing healthcare technology and everyone involved in my recovery, the recovery continues. The journey continues every day. There's a lot going on in the story, but the themes that I hope to touch upon are based on the power of family, the power of support, the power of setting goals, overcoming the error of the human spirit, and the power of just never giving up in your goals every single day. My journey, my story begins back in 2000, July 6, 2004. It was a regular summer day, a month after graduating from high school, had all these goals and dreams for the future. But when I was coming home from Lackey High School, preparing for my college swim season, I was crossed less than 10 minutes from here, and I crossed the intersection and was struck on my driver's side door by a speeding dump truck. The injuries were catastrophic. My heart went across my chest, shattered ribs, shattered pelvis, collapsed lungs, pretty much every major 60% of my blood. I had a concussion at the accident scene, and I was very blessed to have a lot of great supporters that day from my EMS team, my EMTs, my paramedics, my volunteer firefighters, my policemen. And I look at life as every day being a gift, but I also look at life where we see them and we hear about them and we talk about them and we pray to them. It's very rare to actually meet one of your guardian angels. So I look back at my situation on July 6, 2004, and Mr. Keith Bond is here tonight, my medevac pilot, U.S. Park Police Eagle 1. If it wasn't for this man right there, I wouldn't be here talking. I wouldn't be here living. I wouldn't be here at all, because for what he did that day, my golden hour, I didn't even have a golden hour. Time was of the essence, and Keith got me from the accident scene where I was near death. I was trapped in my car, and the volunteer firefighters actually got awards that day for the way they had to extricate me from the vehicle. And then Keith got me from that car, got me from the accident scene, and got me to Prince George's Hospital Center to shock trauma. I was outpatient, pretty much dead on arrival, but I was clinging to life thanks to his support. And we got there, and I was put into immediate surgery, underwent very serious operations on my heart, my lungs, my liver, my kidneys. Everything in my body was failing, it was shutting down, and for me, it came down to the technology, the medicine, the support, but it also came down to the power of prayer and people believing in me, people supporting me. My parents were there every single step of the day, and for us as a family, that was everything, because it was an up and down kind of scenario. The roller coaster ride of ups and downs continued from the moment I was brought into the double doors at shock trauma all the way for the 2 months when I was in ICU. Every day was just trying to get back into life again, trying to cling to life and just trying to get back into the way things used to be. But it was very minimal, very limited, and for me, it came down to just trying to survive. The first couple days, it was a living nightmare. I don't really recall too much of that, but I do remember my parents coming into my room, and they would say, "Brian, you were in a car accident, you have a few broken bones, you'll be out of here in a few days." And I'm thinking to myself, Mom and Dad, why are you crying? Why am I paralyzed? It was just, broken bones. Why can't I talk to you? Why do you look so sad and desperate right now? And I realized after weeks going on, it was much worse than broken bones. So for us as a family, that is what we had. We had that support system, and we just tried to be hopeful. We tried to be positive in a very sad situation, but we had all these amazing people around us supporting us. And my uncle, he created a website to almost create like an online journal or a diary to track the progress to send to my family and my friends. And I had people praying for me and supporting me in Southern Maryland, throughout the state of Maryland, throughout the country, even throughout the world that I didn't even know that were praying for me. And that power of prayer was answered because every day I was still living. I had electricity and blood in my veins, but I was still on this earth. And we kept pushing, we kept fighting every single day. And I was very lucky, because within the first 24 hours, they said it was very critical. If I can survive that, then that's amazing. If I go the first 48 hours, then that's a miracle in itself. And we just kept going. My PA was one of the toughest and one of the strongest personalities that we had. And her name was Mary Kay Ferguson, and she told my parents on the first night, that I was in God's hands. And she asked my parents, was I their only child? And mom and dad shook their heads yes, and she started crying. And we never saw her cry after that point, but in that moment, that's how serious it was for us to realize that this is what we were dealing with. And for my parents, they experienced everything, every second of every day, in a state of almost tunnel vision in a lot of ways. For me, I was medically induced in a coma, not really aware of what was going on around me, but I knew it was very serious when I regained consciousness, and I understood when my parents were there, and I'm hearing their feedback, I'm hearing them talk to me, I'm hearing my nursing staff talk about what is taking place day to day as I'm going to get an operation or going to radiology. I knew how serious it was. And every day, being in that kind of environment, room 19 of ICU for 2 months, it was wearing me down, physically, mentally, psychologically. And I was raised to be a very determined and dedicated person. I was a very grateful person. That helps, having my parents, as amazing as they are, growing up in the church, having that strong faith background. And in my time, in my weakest moments in life, where I was saying my final prayers, which I look back at that and it's like, that's how serious it was, or I didn't think that I could really go much further than where I was when I was in ICU, because that is the extent of the injuries and the extent of my prognosis. But we kept believing that things could get better. We've had, through a divine intervention kind of moment, we're given the strength to realize that in that moment when I was saying my final prayers, that I was giving up. They stepped in and they knew to act in that moment. And they didn't let me give up. They didn't let me die. They kept me focused on the moment. And I could tell by the intensity of my parents, of their eyes. I could see the fire in their eyes. I realized that in that moment, up until in that room, my parents, my family, my friends, we were on this journey together. We were on this journey back to life. And I realized I had to keep going for them. And that desperation, that pep talk, a couple bad words thrown in there. It was very desperate. It was last resort. It was very serious. And to me, it almost shocked the life back into me in a lot of ways. Symbolically, it kept me going, it kept me grounded, and it kept me thinking I had to keep going for my parents and everyone believing in me, and my healthcare staff, my family, my friends. And we just kept hopeful. That night, my parents, they left, and they were just completely at a loss for words. They had given so much themselves, and it was heartbreaking, it was devastating. They didn't know what they were going to see when I would walk in each time they saw me in the hospital room, but they would come in, and in that kind of situation, I thought I had to do something to get back into this. I had to visually show them that I'm still here, I'm still fighting, I'm still living. And I thought, what better thing can I do than to have a smile on my face when they come back into my room that night? And when they did that, I tried to get the nerves in my face to be reactivated, and that put me through seizures. And that brought the neurologist in, and they said, Brian is slipping into a deep coma. This is no longer medically induced, this is a deep coma. And I'm hearing this, I'm like, no. Just give me a chance. I'm just trying to get back to life right now. And my doctors, they were there, they were supporting me, and I just kept pushing through it because I had to go through the burden of having to come back to life in a lot of ways. So the muscles in my face were being reactivated. My parents came in that night, they saw my face, they saw a smile, and I saw the energy, the positivity for once. For the past 2 months, I didn't see that. I saw desperation, I saw sadness, I saw frustration. But until that moment, when I saw them come into that room that night, and they were happy for once, the happiness was back to life in their faces, I just gravitated towards that. I craved that. I was just always hoping to see that from that point on. And I thought, what else can I do to get back into it even more? And I thought, well, I can blink on command, yes or no. I could move my fingers, I can move my toes. And then from that point on, things were just progressing slowly, gradually, baby steps in a lot of ways, but we kept going. And the next week, learning how to talk with a speaking valve, to go from that point to having to rechew ice and drink water and swallow Jello. These types of things make you thirsty just talking about it. Looking back, that is the extent of the gradual progress of coming back into the way things used to be independently. And my parents, they supported me every step of the way, and I could just see, as a family, we were on this journey together, and every bit of sign, every bit of hope that I could bring them, it was reflecting back on my progress and my continued involvement in wanting to get better and to keep going and keep pushing every single day. So we were able to push forward from that. And I look at life in a lot of ways, and I try to find meanings behind that kind of situation. And I was reflecting on that time frame in my life when I was in room 19 of ICU, very serious patient. And I kept thinking to myself, up until that point, why do things like this have to happen to people? I was a a good boy growing up. I did well in school. I was a good son. I was a good classmate. Did well in sports. Did a lot of community service with Sacred Heart and also in the community. And here I am, 18 years old. My life should just be beginning. Now it's ending, and it's not fair. And I had so much frustration. And I just kept thinking, what is the reason behind this? Why did this happen? Why am I going through this? And I just kept realizing, with everything going on with my family and seeing what the people in my room were doing for me to keep me living, that it wasn't the right question that I was asking. It wasn't about why was this happening to me, it was why was I saved? And I realized that I was still on this earth. And in that moment, I reflected on that. Yes, I did have about a dozen machines, very serious machines in my room. I had tubes and electricity all through me, but I was still living, I was still on this earth. And I had a chance to keep going, to keep pushing every single day. And that's what we kept focusing on, the positive aspect of it. And from that point on, that is when I just kept thinking about, it's not about me, it's about my family and about the people believing in me and supporting me. From that point on, we just kept going, we kept striving for miracles every single day. And we were able to go from ICU to PG Hospital to my rehab center in Greene in Baltimore, going from the independence of getting back into life again and taking my first few attempts of getting out of the wheelchair with restraint belts around my waist to just stand on my own with my physical therapy and occupational therapists around me, to have situations where I was just trying to learn how to walk again. And with the accident, with the injuries I sustained, my pelvis was crushed in the accident scene. So the idea of the recovery in ICU was so focused on the heart, the liver, the kidneys, the vital organs. So the bones were just hopefully going to mend back to the way that they used to be, and luckily they did. Not completely to the way they should have been, but just enough to get me to the point where I was able to stand on my own again. And to go from standing to taking a couple inches of walking, to shuffle my feet a foot, 2 feet, 3 feet. And that competitive background that I had from competing in sports at AMS with basketball and track, and at McDonough with powerlifting, bodybuilding, and swimming, and track and field, that competitive mindset just kept me focused that I had to keep going. If I'm doing 10 steps today, tomorrow let's focus on 11 steps, and turn those bigger goals into smaller goals, to gradually progress and to keep going with this overall progress. So for us, that is what it was like for about 3 years. It was occupational therapy, it was physical therapy. And when I was going through that therapy, I remember just sitting in my wheelchair and reflecting on this journey that I've been on for the past couple months and the past year or so. And I was thinking to myself, we have been through a lot. My family and I, we have been through a lot. We've been on this journey, but the journey is continuing. And I'm thinking to myself, as I'm going through my physical therapy sessions, I'm thinking, tomorrow is going to be a better day. Things are rough right now, but tomorrow is going to be a better day. And my faith background is what kept me grounded in that moment. It kept me thinking that these positive things were influencing the way I was able to treat this overall recovery process. And that's what kept me focused on that dedication, that perseverance, and the overall support that my family had, that we had, and everyone praying for us and believing in us every second of every single day. So that's what we focused on, that's what we thrived on. And I thought to myself that if I ever get better, if I ever make a full recovery, when that day comes, I don't know. But one day, what if I am able to make that full recovery? I want to go out and help others in a similar type of adverse situation. I want to help other patients. I want to help their families as they go through their ordeal in a hospital with recovery or with some kind of type of situation that's similar to my background. I wanted to represent blood donors. As a 36-time blood recipient, I wanted to speak in behalf of those impacted by the power of donating blood. So for me, these are the goals that I had, but I also wanted to go back to my rescue squads and my firefighters and my medevac pilot and my hospital staff, and thank them for what they did for me on July 6, 2004, in the 2 months when I was in ICU, and the 3 years of follow-up, many procedures and operations and surgeries, and it was just an ongoing journey. But the best part was the journey continued from that point on. And for me, a year after leaving ICU, I was very blessed to be able to have that almost, it was partial full recovery, and that was to go to college, St. Mary's College, where I did my undergraduate studies. I was able to swim on the team with my freshman team. Not anywhere where I was at McDonough when I was swimming. I was state champion swimmer. It was nowhere near that level, but I was on the swim team, and that meant the world to me, to be back in the water doing what I love to do. And then for me, going through the classes and just going through the process of doing art therapy and putting my thoughts down in the journals. When I went back into the hospital to visit, I also went back because I was also a patient, again, because I had a pleural effusion. I had fluid building up around the heart and the lungs, and I even though it was a very serious complication, I didn't know what I was walking into and what I was experiencing. It was like a reunion with my hospital staff. My nurses said, Brian, how's your recovery going? How's your therapy? I said, it's going okay, but it's taken some time. The physical aspect of it is progressing, but the emotional, the psychological, it's taken some time. My parents are going through a lot with post-traumatic stress. I'm going through a lot, but we're doing okay. We're very happy with the way things are and just trying to get back into life and continue on. But they said to help with the overall recovery process, put your thoughts down in a journal or a composition book, and you can track that progress visually by a daily basis, by a weekly basis, and a monthly basis to create that overall motivation for the future. You can look back on one day and say, wow, this is how much you overcame. This is the journey you've been on. This is how far you went from point A to point B. And I thought about that, and when I went home at the end of November of 2004, it was around Thanksgiving, I thought, what better way to celebrate Thanksgiving than to start writing my thoughts down in these journals. And I poured my heart and soul into these books that I didn't know really what I was writing. I was just pouring my heart and soul into this, reflecting on the journey, putting my workouts in there, putting my thought process in there, putting what my family and I were going through. And over the years, I had a stack of journals about a foot high, and the recovery was not completely there yet, but it was still progressing. It was almost there. And for me, when I was in college, it was 2 years later, I was thinking to myself, wow, we have come a long way over the years. I'm in college, I'm doing a swim team, life is good, but we're almost back to 100% recovery. If I coughed or sneezed, Mom and Dad would take me to Savista, and we would go to the emergency room and we'd get checked out, and I'm like, this is no way to live. I have to do something to show Mom and Dad that I'm okay. Don't have to worry anymore. I'm over 20 years old now, and they don't have to worry. I'm not an ICU patient. Things are better than what they were when I was in the summer of 2004. But for me, I thought, what can I do to show my family and those around me looking after me and taking care of me, what can I do to show them that I'm okay, I'm back to life, and what can I do to show myself that I'm recovered? And for me, growing up, I've always watched the Ironman triathlon on TV, ABC, The Wide World of Sports, on NBC Sports. I've watched this show since I was little. I remember my dad talking about it. We talked about it before, and I remember watching that race when I was very little. I don't remember this, but my dad does. And we watched the swim portion of the race, and I said to my dad, Dad, it looks so scary. When the swimmers started the race, you got 2,000 people, the cannon goes off, and they're all going in one area in the Pacific Ocean. And I never thought, looking back at that time frame, that one day I would be in that same race. It was just, life is funny that way. But for me, to go into that kind of race, I knew it would take something as extreme as an Ironman triathlon to complete the healing process. But to do that, I had to go to my doctors and my nurses, my same doctors and nurses that I had when I was in ICU. I had to do my stress tests, I had to do my x-rays, I had to do EKGs and all types of medical procedures to show I can attempt doing this race. Physically, emotionally, I wasn't sure. Psychologically, I was hopeful. But we had to at least give it a try, and that's what we did. My parents, I had to talk them into it. I had to convince them after many, many conversations, a couple heated debates about it. But for us, I had to tell Mom and Dad that I needed to do this. I had to do this for myself, for them, and for everyone a part of this journey. I had to do this to get back into life again. And for me, we went to Steelhead, Michigan. It was my first half Ironman with 2 weeks of training. I did my training right here in La Plata. I trained at La Plata High School, at McDonough High School, around the track. Learned how to ride that road bike that's in there, the red road bike, around the track. It was brutal. I was very thankful that there's a rubber track there because it softened the landing when I would wreck into the fence. I would just go through the process of trying to learn how to run a half marathon within 2 weeks. I went on the treadmill. You probably saw me on Route 6 a couple times, because that's where I was. And I trained for this race with no idea of what I was doing, but I thought to myself, I had to at least attempt it. And when I went into the race on October 13th, 2007, it was the longest day of my life. It was painful, but for once, it was a good kind of pain. And I remember just starting that race, and the can went off, and halfway through that swim, I got a cramp in my leg, and I turned over on my back, and I'm just kind of treading water. And my background was swimming. I would swim at CSM, and I would swim at Lackey, and I would swim all over the area. But here I am in the Pacific Ocean, in open water swim with great whites swimming around, and Navy SEALs under the water to make sure no one's, everyone's doing okay. It was a different kind of swimming for me. There was no lap lanes to look at underneath the water. So we just stayed hopeful. I turned over, I looked over at the sky, and I said a prayer thinking to myself, how lucky am I to have come this far in life, to look back at this journey, to go from ICU to the Hawaii Ironman World Championship 3 years later. Life is a gift, life is an absolute blessing, and just to be here today, I'm gonna make the most of it. That's all I can really do, that's all I can hope for. So I got through the swim, cramps and all, got to the bike portion. I had no background in the biking portion except for the 6 weeks of training that I had for that sport. And for me, I didn't know how to clip my feet into the pedals. The aero bars were a whole new technology for me, a whole new terminology. I never even heard of aero bars except for watching the Tour de France during the summer on TV. It wasn't what I was used to. And for me, my background, like I said, was swimming, but it was sprints. It was 2 laps at the most. We're talking 2.5 miles. And for me, different types of muscle fibers. So I wasn't used to that aspect as well. And then with the running aspect, it was just trying to get one foot in front of the other. So we went from the swim, finished that. The bike, 7.5 hours. I was all numb, but that was actually helpful. I got to the run, and it was just close to actually, it was sunset. We had glow sticks around our necks, and we were just on the Queen K Highway, and it was lava fields, and it was so dark and depressing, but for me, it was so cathartic because I was on this journey back to life. And I had almost close to 15 hours to reflect on this journey that I've been on, and my parents have been on, and they're at the finish line waiting for me. And that was my motivation to get to that finish line, because for me, I wasn't sure I was able to finish that race that day, but I was still hopeful. From the swim to the bike, and the running was just running, then jogging, then walking, then misery, then walking some more. It was just an ongoing process, but like I said, it was a good kind of pain, and I didn't really think I could finish that race until I saw the lights about 100 yards away, and it was close to about 9:30 at night. Like, the cutoff was midnight, so I was well under the cutoff, which was great. And I just put the hammer down. I finished out the last 100 yards, saw my parents, all the lights were there. And when I crossed the finish line, it was like it was like giving the breath of life all over again. And I just felt so good. I felt so hopeful. And my parents and I, we just felt so rejuvenated. And I didn't have to worry. They didn't have to worry anymore either. Everything we hoped that race would achieve, it achieved it greatly. And when I came home from that race, it took about a month to recover from. I'm still recovering from. I've done many races since then, and my races are my way of representing my platform of speaking on behalf of other patients, other ICU patients, speaking on behalf of blood recipients in the Red Cross. And that was my goal. Like I said, if I ever was able to complete that healing process, that recovery, my goal was to be a positive influence on other people going through a similar adverse situation. So that's what I did. I came home, I became a Red Cross volunteer, started doing blood drives, donated blood myself at my hospital. That saved my life. I was able to go and speak to other families, to other patients going through recovery, and to almost create a platform to be a voice of the patient experience in healthcare, in the healthcare setting, and to be able to reach out and talk to them and help guide them through that navigational aspect of going through a recovery, because it is life-changing, it is life-orienting, and for my parents and I, we wish we had someone to turn to for answers. Is tomorrow going to be a better day? What's going to be happening next week? We just wish we had someone we could reach out to that understood what we were going through. So ever since that day, July 6, 2004, it's been about that platform, about making a positive impact, having that journey back to life, and just being a positive influence to everyone who's been a part of this journey with me, and just reaching out and just being so thankful for everyone who's been a part of this. My parents, my family, my friends, Keith, my medevac pilot. I mean, this is what makes life so important to me every single day. When I wake up, I move my fingers, I move my toes, I open my eyes. No matter what happens that day, it's going to be a great day. Because I'm not in a coma, I'm not in room 19, life is good. And that living nightmare that I existed in a little over 11 and a half years ago, it is in the memory that I have. It's all there in my subconscious thoughts and everything. And for me, I don't want to ever forget that, because it's maybe the person I am today. And I realize, going back in that aspect of things, it is about looking at life and helping others along that journey. And one of my favorite readings from the Bible is, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness shall not overcome it. And for me, that was so important for me to reflect on that, because my faith background, going to AMS, going to Sacred Heart, getting my sacraments there, reconciliation, got my first communion, was confirmed there. My patron saint is Saint Sebastian, patron saint of athletes, which is great. So for me, having that faith background, being here tonight with 301 Catholic, being here as a part of Sacred Heart Church, it's a blessing, because for me, I have seen life in many different angles and perspectives. And to have that background where I've seen life in that kind of outlook, I look at life as that gift, as a blessing. And my parents and I were just so thankful. And I believe it comes from the way that I was raised. My parents raised me to be a grateful person, appreciative, dedicated, to be a good member of society, of the community, and just to be a good person overall. And to go to Sacred Heart for all my sacraments, to go to AMS for elementary and middle school, it really formed the foundation of who I am as a person, as an individual. And when I was in the hospital and I was thinking about those moments when I was having those questions, I never questioned my faith. If anything, my faith was strengthened. I never had a situation where I was angry with God. I remember just thinking to myself, like I said, why is this happening? There has to be a reason behind this. And it took some time for me to realize that as bad as it was then, tomorrow could be a better day. And for me, I just always try to stay hopeful in that regard and think tomorrow will be a better day. And it's up to me to have that responsibility to create that better day for all those around me, whether it's my community, in the nation, with my volunteer work, or with what I do in healthcare on an international level. It's just about making every day an absolute gift for everyone who comes into contact with that. There's a lot going on right now in the world, a lot going on this month. I mean, the political aspect of things, March Madness, there's so much taking place. And for me, it's all we can do to be the light in that darkness, to find that symbol of hope and to help others along their paths in life. And for me, I had that set journey that I had planned for myself, and I graduated high school in 2004. But that path was altered. My life was put on standby. I was on a different kind of path now. And for me, it was about taking the most of that situation and still trying to make the best of it, the best situation that I could, and to be able to find that way where I could, reach. So for me, it's about making the most of life. And for me, that faith background is what made me the person I am today. And it's a long story, a very intense beginning, but the journey continues, which is the amazing part. There's a lot to cover in that 11.5-year time span. If there's any questions you may have, I'd be honored to answer them for you. My life is literally an open book. Yes?
Is that how your book was written? Was through the journals, the compilation of all that over time, and then it ended up in a book? Or how did that come about?
Great question. And that is actually how Ironheart came to be, a published book. For me, I had these journals, and it was a stack of journals about a foot high. And for me, when I did the Ironman, the story kind of got some attention here in the community, and then with Ellen's show and the Today Show and a couple of national interviews. So Triathlete Magazine, the founder, Bill Katalski, my co-author, he reached out to me and he said, Brian, it's a very unique story. And would you be interested in doing a chapter in my book called Return to Fitness? I said, I'd be honored to. A couple months went by, I did a chapter with him, and I went back to Bill and I said, Bill, I have an idea for a book. And I have all these journals that I've written over the years from my experiences being an ICU patient and going from that experience to finishing the Ironman. I think this book could help, my experiences could help other people in all aspects of life, not just car accident victims and people going through needing a lot of blood and a lot of operations and ICU patients, but anyone in life can relate to the story in some measure. So we had that. Bill was interested, found a publisher in New York City, and we had about 6 months to take those stack of journals that was a foot high and to condensing that into a final draft. So everything in the book, it was all my writing, but I had a co-author to help condense it because I had about 100,000 words down to what it came to be in a final format. I began writing the book when I was 18, when I was still in recovery, and it came from that aspect of the recovery process. The first couple days and around Thanksgiving of 2004, putting my thoughts down. That's how the book starts. Chapter 1 is that book. And for me, it just goes all the way until the finish line of the Hawaii Ironman. So it goes from a sad beginning to a happy, kind of positive reinforcement kind of ending. And when I wrote the book, I never thought anyone would read it. I thought maybe people, my parents would buy a copy, maybe some friends would be interested. I'd have to coach them into signing the book and giving it to them. But it was just amazing to see the outreach over the years with my healthcare work and my volunteer work with humanitarian relief and disaster services. I've done a lot of stuff with the Catholic youth. I've done an event with St. Mary's Riken for the past 5 years with their English classes. They read Ironheart. I spend the entire day with them, and we talk about the book, and if they enjoyed the book. And
my boys had the blessing to go through that with you.
Really?
Down at St. Mary's Riken.
Which year?
2011.
That was my first year.
And 2015.
That was my very first year. This year was my 5th year. Did it 2 weeks ago with Mrs. France, my English class.
Yeah, it really affected them.
And to hear that feedback and just to be involved with the youth, there's just so much energy, and I just love to hear their feedback and their experiences because, like I said, I wrote the book to help other people in a similar environment, and to have the book being taught in high schools, to have the book being read in colleges. I never thought in a million years that would happen, and I'm just very blessed to have that kind of platform, and I've used that platform in a way to help and to help inspire and help motivate. And with Riken, that's where the idea really came from. In 2007, I was honored to be included in Inside the Vatican's top 10 people of 2007. I was in several publications in the United Kingdom, in Catholic newspapers. Did an interview last week with Catholic TV. I spoke for Blessed to Play this past Monday in a radio interview. I'm very involved in my Catholic faith. That's my background. That's what has made me the person I am today, and being the person to go out there and be that positive, almost that voice of hope and so forth. So for me to be able to talk to the Riken students and to all, I've spoken to over several dozen high schools now, which started at Riken, but all throughout the country. And
do you suffer from any chronic pain from either joint? How do you, if you do suffer from chronic pain, how do you manage that?
For me, when I made the decision to do the Ironman in 2007, the big concern was the heart and the vital organs. And I thought to myself, if I can do this race, if my body can handle this, then my body's healed. And when I crossed the finish line, that was it. I was healed. No more medication, no more follow-up procedures or physical therapy or occupational therapy. I was back to life. Ever since then, I've only had two minor, I had a stress fracture in my hip. That's from training, not from the accident recovery time frame. And I go out there and I bike for 5 hours on the Indian Head Rail Trail. I run at Laurel Springs near La Plata on the cross-country trails all throughout the area. You still probably see me on Route 6 every now and then. Those injuries that I've had just come from training. I've never had to take any kinds of medication since then. The pleural effusion I had when I was going through recovery in 2004 was just after effect of being on life support for 2 months, but that was the extent of any kind of injuries as far as the body was concerned. So from that point on, ever since then, everything's been great. Knock on wood. Yes.
Is there a Brian Boyle Foundation?
How
How do we keep this going? I mean, I see you going in and, you know, doing all this wonderful work. These people that you're spending time with must want to join you eventually. And it just seems like a foundation. I mean, share the wealth that you've got here.
That's been a goal of mine. That's been a goal of mine. And over the years, being an advocate for healthcare, being the patient safety, patient experience kind of advocate for that realm of healthcare, and then doing my Red Cross volunteer work, that's what my volunteer services are based on. But for me, I want to be able to contribute so much more than that. Not just talk about it, but be able to get in there and really have that influence and be a part of things. So one day, that is the overall goal, to have like an Ironheart Foundation of sorts.
Absolutely.
And for me, it's just, like I said, it's about having that impact and just helping to create that inspiration or motivation, or just being able to reach out and just focus in on those things in life. Because like I said, there's a lot going on in this day and age, and we have to look within ourselves and think how lucky we are, how blessed we are to have what we have, and the health that we have, and the people we have around us. I think those types of themes, everyone can just sit back and reflect on every now and then and say, wow, I'm lucky. And that's really what that kind of situation is. So one day, that's the goal, an Ironheart Foundation. We're still working on it.
All right, we'll support you.
Thank you, appreciate that. Yes, sir.
It took towards the end to answer the first question I had, which was, did you ever say, why? You know, why God, me? But you answered that towards the end. When you, at some point, you started going back, whether it was the Sacred Heart to other churches, did you find going into the physical structure of the church was beneficial, or you just had that from your upbringing, so it was more in you as opposed to the physical location?
I remember just when I was in elementary and middle school, my faith was so strong back then. I remember my dad would talk about it. I remember I would win the religion, like not spelling bees, but like the religion bees that we'd have at A&S. And I came in one day and I had a cross, and it still has it in his truck. And for me, my faith has always been that way. I was raised to be the person I am today, and that's because of my family and because of my faith. It's kept me positive, it's kept me grounded. And over the years, I don't know where that strength came from. I don't know where that platform really began, but I remember even when I was still in ICU, I remember being a patient myself, and I would have other patients' families. They would hear my story from the nurses and from the doctors, and they just wanted to see me. And they would walk in my room and they would say a prayer with me, or they would talk to me. And when I was in the hospital, I remember being given the last rites. I don't forget that. So for me, it was comforting to have that, but it was also eye-opening because I realized how serious this was. I know my sacraments, And that was one I was not expecting to get. So for me, when I was there and these families would come to my room and I would see them and I was in the hallways, I wanted to talk to them. And I was, like I said, still patient, but I thought with my experiences, I could understand a little bit of what they're going through in that time frame and their hardship. I could sense what they're going through. And I wanted to be that beacon of hope. And I'm not sure, like I said, where that strength, where that idea came from. But that's where it really kind of formed for me. I went to rehab in Baltimore, and like I said, I was in my wheelchair, and I'm reflecting that if I ever recover from this, I don't want to just get back into life and live life. I want to thrive. I want to help others thrive and live their lives and make that impact as well, and live their goals and achieve their dreams. So that was formed way long ago, way before the accident. And I think that was a very big component of what kept me so positive when I was in ICU. Because I had that frustration. I had those questions. Why did this happen to me? Why am I going through this? Then I realized it wasn't about me. Why are my parents going through this? You know, it was much more than just me in that hospital bed. And from that point on, it was just about going from point A to point B and helping others along that journey with myself, with my family. And the faith has always been strong. I got married 2 years ago, and my wife, she's a devoted Catholic. She went to Mount DeSales up in Catonsville. She's from Carroll County, and our first couple dates were in Annapolis. And it was really meaningful to me because, you know, having that kind of faith background for her and myself, when I proposed to her, I proposed in the church. We lit a candle, and I got down on my knee, and I proposed to my wife, Pam, who's a nurse practitioner. And I remember the day of the wedding, the priest acknowledging that during the service, and he was so impressed with that. And I was really glad that he mentioned that, because that's how big of a deal our faith is to us as a couple and as a family. And for us, we look back at that, and it's that ongoing journey. And like I talked about that divine intervention with my parents, and knowing that I wasn't giving up on life, so to speak, but I just wasn't seeing any positive aspect of me leaving that room. And it was so arduous, and it was so intense, and it was so draining and frustrating that I didn't know what else to do. And I had those conversations, and I had those final prayers, and I'm thinking, I need help. And it came through Mom and Dad, because they would come in every single day. They would stand next to my bed, and they would talk to me, and they would try, and they would be hopeful as they could be. But that day, they knew it was different. They knew somehow with my reactions it was different. And for me, we just look back at that day and we don't forget it. We talk about it on a regular basis, and I think about it every single day, because it's made me on that platform of what I do now as a person that I am. But when I go to church, and I go every week, it's like going home. It's that sanctuary, and I'm in there, and it's emotional for me, because I go in there and it's my time to really reflect. When I go to my races, that in a way is my sanctuary, because I go into these races and I'm thinking to myself, my heart's racing, my blood's pumping. There were once signs that I was dying, now there's signs that I'm living. And I don't ever want to lose that feeling. So when I do a 5K or a 100-mile ultra marathon or an Ironman triathlon, that's my way of showing the gratitude to the people supporting me, but also to have me aware that I'm alive, and this is great, and I never want to forget that feeling. So with my faith, it all comes back from that aspect of things. And I'll also look back at the power of family, and that's one of it was so important for me, because I'm an only child. My dad had cancer when I was in second grade, and I remember that experience, being so young, and we would just go through the process. Dad was doing chemotherapy and had his operation, and I remember my dad showing that quiet strength. And I remember being young, but I remember being aware of what was taking place. And I remember I would sit at the top of the stairs, and I would look at him, and he was down in the living room recovering, and I felt so sad and scared to go around him. I didn't know how to talk to him. I didn't know how to go to be around him, because he was going through so much, and I knew how serious it was, because it was affecting our family. And I could just see what was taking place. My dad knew what was taking place, and I remember the first day he got back on his feet, and he walked with a cane to the end of the steps to where I was seated at the top of the steps. I looked down at him, and he just stood there, you know, without the cane, and he just showed that intensity. And for me, when I was in the hospital, it was the same kind of intensity. That fire in his eyes, that's divine intervention. That is what kept me going. It was my family's love, which came from, you know, a higher power for us as a family. We never forget that. And it's just, you know, amazing the support that we've had over the years. And I look back at my parents and what they've gone through. We've gone through a lot, but, you know, we're the happiest people. You know, They went through post-traumatic stress. They didn't have they had Zoloft. They didn't have morphine like I did when I was in the coma. You know, I didn't have to feel that physical pain. They experienced every second of every single day. So for us, you know, we just speak on behalf of that aspect of it, but it comes back from the faith and from the way I was raised. It's a long answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Do you have a second book coming out, Brian?
I just finished my second book last March. Last year it came out. It's called The Patient Experience. And that book is a lot like Ironheart. Ironheart was the first person perspective from the recovery, room 19 of ICU to the Hawaii Ironman finish line. The Patient Experience is more of the medical takeaways from that. And it also is a way to share the gratitude to healthcare providers, to EMS providers. And that, to me, I thought it was so important to have that recognition, because in healthcare, you see it on the news, you see it on the radio, you hear it in the newspapers, the healthcare costs, financial costs. For me, I want to highlight the gratitude that I have as an ICU patient, because I saw what they did every single day when I was a patient in there, and what my EMS providers did, and my medevac pilot did. I don't forget that. So this book was a tribute. This book was a way to help other families going through their time in the hospital or a recovery process. It's being taught in medical schools and nursing schools. Ironheart is a more uplifting book. The Patient Experience is more educational, and I do educational and healthcare presentations based on that experience in that book. But for me, I thought that book had to be written to have other families and other patients know that someone knows what they're going through, that someone can relate, that understands, and that's the voice that I've been trying to put on that platform over the years in healthcare on a national basis and now international basis. And the patient experience comes from that, from our experience, and not really having someone to turn to for answers. So we hope that this book can provide answers to others. I'm actually working on a third book right now. It's more a children's book, which is a whole different aspect of things. It's a very extreme, very intense story, but this is much more lighthearted. And it's actually based on my, I have a bulldog, an English bulldog, and she's going to be doing her first triathlon. So it's just a fun hobby. When I was at St. Mary's, my studies were focused on art therapy. I was still doing recovery myself when I was doing my undergraduate studies. Now I'm at Johns Hopkins and I'm doing my MA, Master's in Communication, and going on to my MBA and PhD in patient safety. So for me, it's just about just speaking on behalf of those experiences and going forth with that. But I write for the Huffington Post, I write for the British Medical Journal. I have a column with several different academic journals, and for me, I didn't plan to become a writer or a journalist. It was just my way of just representing former ICU patients and blood recipients. Now on this national platform that I've been on, it's just been a whirlwind, but also a blessing too, because I've been able to go and travel the country and host blood drives. And we've been able to bring in thousands upon thousands of blood units from all over the country. And it really inspired me to know, because when I was an ICU patient, I needed blood to survive. I lost about 60%. I pretty much bled out internally when I got to shock trauma. And for me, when I was brought in there, and I heard about it later on, that I received 36 transfusions and 13 plasma treatments, it impacted me. So I thought to myself, one day, I want to be able to give back, literally, my own blood to these people that had been a part of this overall survival. And I heard about that because in the summer of 2004, which in most summers, the blood supply lowers. There's a decrease. And I heard that we had blood coming in from other parts of the country, from Minnesota, from Chicago, from even out west. All over the country, blood was coming in to be able to be given to people like me in need, type O negative. So for me, I don't forget that. So I do my volunteer work with blood services, and I speak on behalf of healthcare. And over the years, I've spent thousands. Half my time is volunteer work. Half my time is devoted to raising awareness on those causes. And when I go out there, I represent myself and my background, but also Southern Maryland, to go to the White House and speak and be awarded the Champion of Change, to go to the Ellen Show, to Hollywood. And I was able to go there and represent my hometown and represent this is what we're about. In Southern Maryland, in Charles County, it's was a big factor too in my recovery, because when we were going through the hospital phase, we had phone calls coming in from all over, from my family, my friend in the Tri-County area, from my Officer Savoy at McDonough, he used to be there, my principal, Garth Boyle, all my teachers, they would reach out to me, they would come to visit, my classmates. this is such a close, tight-knit community. We are a very resilient community. I think looking back at the tornado back in the early 2000s, we're a very resilient group of people. And in our experience, in our time frame, as our family went through it, that resilience, it brought that overall team support system for us. It brought that motivation, it brought that support, and it brought that overall positivity as we continued on. Because when I came home, I would go to a Safeway and I would see everyone. I'm in a wheelchair, and they're like, they would know because my uncle put the online journal on this. It was like almost like back in, now we have Caring Bridge, which is an online journal that you can track people's progress when they're in a hospital or going through some kind of recovery phase. Back then we didn't have Caring Bridge, but my uncle created this website, and everyone in the community and the state, we had from all over, they were tuned into this. And when I would go out and they would see me, like, he exists, there he is. And it really motivated me to see that and to go from that point to just recover, to get back into life again, and then to get back into getting independent, and then to go and do the Ironman. This community, that support, it was like being, it was like the ticker tape parade coming back, you know. It was just so meaningful to me, and I was just so thankful to have that support because, like I said, back in the day when I was growing up, I was raised based on my faith and going to Archbishop Neal and so forth. So my community is a part of who I am, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud to be from Southern Maryland, to be from Charles. I just moved there, so I'm still, my heart's still in Charles County. But for me, it's just been a phenomenal experience, and I'm just so thankful for the support. Yes?
From the time of your accident up until the present day, have you ever had anybody try and blame you for it? Because I believe you had a Camaro, right?
Yes.
And you're 18, just out of high school. Have you ever had, I've read things how you jumped out into the intersection doing a burnout, stuff
Yes.
like that. How do you deal with that kind of stuff?
That was tough because with the concussion I sustained at the accident scene, that day didn't exist. On the accident reconstructionist and going back and getting everything figured out as far as looking at the tire marks and where the car, find out what took place that day. And for me to have that peace of mind, to have almost closure in understanding that the accident wasn't my fault. I was a good driver, never had any speeding tickets, I still don't. Knock on wood. I'm a very safe driver. And for me to go in that situation, and I was for me, it was just, I guess it was kind of put in that regard, but for me, it's a long time, and that's the way I look at July 6th. There's an embankment there, and it's only 10 minutes, it's less than 10 minutes from here, Ripley and Poorhouse. It's just it's been done to change it over the years. And we look at, I say wrong place, wrong time, but then I also look at it in a way where everything else that happened that day, things have improved. And to go back and find out based on that day, that was amazing to hear. Because I always wondered that. We went about 2 years before we really found out, because the first 2 years were all about recovery. I was still a patient, I was still recovering. But to find out about what happened that day, it really was, it really meant a lot for the closure aspect of things. Good question, by the way.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Well, you're just such a bright light, and it's such, so great to have you here, and I want to thank you for representing how you live your life. And I actually had a question for either your mom or dad or both, but you said a few times that day, that really bad day when you were like giving up, that there was sort of a divine intervention, and if that was sort of an inner feeling that you had, or did you really feel like God kind of moved in some sort of way, Christian thing, like what was that?
It was him.
He wasn't responding to us. Brian would always make eye contact at least when we would go in, and that day he stopped making eye contact. He wouldn't respond, and you just could tell he was giving up. And I told her about it. I told her about it. I said, I think this is it. He's gonna let go. Guys, it was operations every day. His heart sac was filled with blood. Every day we were signing papers for another operation, another operation. I mean, this is, he didn't realize, he says a story, but he doesn't realize how drastic every day it was an operation. And it was too much. It was too much for anybody. It was too much for us to even watch. Then we saw him giving up. I mean, this is the hardest thing I ever had. Ironman had me for 2 hours trying to get me to get that part. I couldn't open up. It was really hard. It was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. I called it pep talk, but it was desperation. yeah, I had a few choice words of mine to get his attention, because I never really had to yell at this kid and say anything, but I got his attention.
He got mad.
I got,
He got mad.
and he looked at me. I said, Brian, I need you.
It's
so hard. So hard to say.
Look at me going.
Son, I need you to, I know how hard this is. I need you to fight. I need you to fight for your future wife. I need you to fight for your future children that you don't even have yet. Life is going to be such a treasure if you can get through this.
Like for us.
But then I had to ruin it for myself. I said, right now I need you to fight for mom and dad. We can't do this without you. So it was.
It was intense. It was it was mean.
And you know, I didn't know he responded to it, but the next day, the nurse called our first visit. She called us and she goes, Brian has a surprise for you. Wow, big difference from yesterday. And looked at him and he, you know, none of his muscles were working. But he slowly put a little smile on his face and looked at us. That was
big.
That was big.
That was everything.
It was just like a tough love thing, I guess. You always hear about it, you know, until you experience it. And we didn't know what we were doing. There was no guidebook. There was nobody
to talk to in the hospital.
And he's a young kid.
Yeah.
And you didn't know what happened. And you didn't really know what happened.
But then he tells us later on that he remembers that day and that was his turning point.
Because I will tell you, one thing I really remember at the hospital when we were getting to leaving him, or taking him out to go to Greene, we thanked Dr. Catavinas, the director in the video at PG Hospital. And we went up to him and, you know, held his hand and we thanked him deeply. And he looked at me and he said, it wasn't me. And he looked up. So we knew. I'm like, it really is true. Miracles do happen. It's amazing. You know, I mean, we're just a mom and dad, normal people, you know.
It was mom and dad wouldn't do what we did. You know, we know that. You know, we fight for your children. But I do believe he's definitely a miracle, guys. How he made it through that first 24 hours, because he didn't even look alive. Those machines.
It's horrific. And I can only imagine what Keith must have seen. He still hasn't told us.
We don't want to know, Keith. To yourself.
Since Brian brought me here, I'll ask one tough question because I love his parents. When are you going to bless him with a grandchild?
He's working on it.
That's the plan. That's the plan.
Because your pain is one thing, their pain was a whole different.
I want a whole pile of grandchildren.
Yeah.
And guys, Keith was at his wedding.
Yeah.
And so were some of his EMS people. So
Yeah.
it was really. And Dr. Catavinas was up dancing.
Yeah.
Which was, he could barely smile in the hospital, so it was quite.
Almost have to chase him down the
Yeah.
hallways to get answers
Yeah.
some days.
We've come a long way.
Yeah.
But he's had a good background, it's a good community, good schools, sports, people. So it's the people.
Brian, this is sort of an ethical question. You talked about like your platform for patient safety, and it just really struck me when you were talking about you were actually trying to smile, but the medical professional was thinking you were going into a deep coma. And you know, as Catholics, we've seen in the news and things from Scary Shibo to other situations where, you know, people's there's sort of a determination made that this person's quote brain dead or gone, and sometimes you find out later people were in a coma for a long time and heard and felt things but couldn't express it. And so is that part of your platform at all when you talk about patient safety, or is it something completely different?
Yes, that's one of the many aspects of my platform as a healthcare advocate, as a patient safety advocate. Because for me, when I talk to healthcare groups or hospital associations or other patients and other families, I talk about my experience and how aware I was of my surroundings, which is very unique in a lot of ways, because when I was there, I was paralyzed. But I was so hypersensitive to my surroundings because that was my survival. I had to depend on my hearing and my sight to understand what was taking place around me. On the outside, on the external surface, I was a comatose patient, but inside, I was so tuned into my environment, and it would wean me off the medication. And in those moments, I would do all I could to claw my way back to living, and I would just try to just show whatever I could do, whether it was blinking or it wasn't always reliable because the medication was always up and down, but I was always tuned into that environment. So for me, when I talk to a family of a patient who's comatose, which I do on a regular basis, I always really emphasize the impact and the importance of talking to that patient. They may not be able to show it, but there's always that chance, there's always that glimmer of hope. In that kind of situation for me, being in that bed myself, knowing what kind of thought process could be taking place, I reflect on what types of things could be pondered on. So when I talk to a family or I talk to a healthcare group, I always emphasize talk to the patient, whether they can hear you or not, because they could be tuned in and they could be receptive of what you're saying. In that moment, they may need all that motivation they can get because they can be making life and death situations right in that moment. So it's always good to have that overall atmosphere, a calm atmosphere, to embrace that, to have a TV on, to have that mental stimulation, have the radio on, their favorite music, to kind of create that overall soothing environment, to have a fan on to cool them down. Talking to them, communication, that's actually the name of my book's called The Patient Experience, The Importance of Care, Communication, and Compassion. Communication is critical in ICU, really any department of the hospital, but with a comatose patient, talking to them, you just don't know what kind of impact you're making. So it is so important to at least make that attempt, to open that line of communication, to reach out. And for me, I'm so glad my parents did, and didn't stop. Because we didn't know. And for us, we had 2 months, and my parents, they're the story. I'm just their voice, because a lot of this stuff, they don't want to talk too much about. But they do talk about it. But for me, I speak on behalf of their experience, as our family's experience. And for everything we went through, they would talk to me. They would keep me calm, and they did their best to keep me hopeful. And we had our moments. We had our rough days. We had our dark moments, and I'm thinking, I'm never going to leave here. I was depressed, I was frustrated, I was doing my final prayers, but I realized that those final prayers were just more prayers for more survival and more hope and more continuation of where I'm going right now. And this is building this experience for me to have an ability to reach out to someone else in the future one day and say, I know what you're going through. As tough as it is to talk about it, for me it's also healing, because with what we went through, a lot of post-traumatic stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of frustration. I live in the next county, but mom and dad, I call them, I text them whenever I drive somewhere. I'm almost 30 years old. They'll never be different. That's okay. But for us, they always talk to me, and my healthcare staff talked to me, and they got to know me. I couldn't even talk to them, but they would have that conversation, and they would come to my room, and they would look at the Get Well cards on the side of my wall and my photos, and they knew that I was a swimmer, and I graduated McDonough with a 4.0, and I was a state champion swimmer. I worked hard when I was in high school, and they were very happy to see that when I was brought in my blood, everything was clean. And that's with motor vehicle accidents with teenagers, you never know. For me, they were just so happy to see that. And they told me that basically I had spent my entire life preparing for that moment on July 6th, athletically, to survive that initial impact of the crash, and then to go from that point to going to ICU, to shock trauma, to rehab. But all those things, it came from the open lines of communication, of caring, and just never giving up hope.
Is that new book available yet?
It is. It's on my website's Ironheart Brian Boyle, and I can send signed copies. I mean, it's there. It's on Amazon too, Barnes & Noble. Ironheart's actually in the bookstores. The Patient Experience hasn't made it to the bookstores yet, but we're working on that, so hopefully.
Anyone else?
I just have not a question but a statement. This gentleman here in the teal shirt asked if Brian had a foundation, and we've actually talked about that before, and so hopefully one day he'll have it. And you said you support Brian. One way you can support Brian, you can do that now, and that's one of the things he's a big advocate for, is donating blood. So I asked people, he didn't ask anyone, but I'll ask people here, and I have asked because I've already